Time to go tailgating with offshoreinsiders.com. Free college football picks info. We will have some free college football picks for Saturday. Joe Duffy's picks 28-13 in football, college and pro. 10 Saturday winners led by a wise guy play. Sunday NFL up, and you've got more coming, but you got a couple wise guys up for Sunday. 14-3 in the NFL since the preseason, and it's at offshoreinsiders.com, www.offshoreinsiders.com. Now, some balls to the walls, news and notes. San Jose State and Utah. Utah possible letdown game after playing a terrible team off of playing their rivals BYU. Kyle Whittingham said unequivocally he's not going to rest anyone in this game. He, the Utah head coach. San Jose State already got crushed by USF in Texas by a combined 98-22. And remember, they jumped ahead of USF in that game 19-0. Underdogs of 27 or more off a 56-point or more shutout loss are 10-16 against the spread. That would benefit Utah. Of course, that's not statistically significant, but we keep telling you college football is the biggest momentum sport out there, including teams that don't have momentum are usually good to go against. San Jose State coach Brent Brennan is a first-year coach and appears to be a little bit overwhelmed. So far, the Utes have really only used about 30% of their playbook. They've got new offensive coordinator Troy Taylor, and then Tyler Huntley, their quarterback. Oregon transfer Darren Kerrigan, the third, has 17 receptions. Working in a new offense would be maybe some reason to continue to pile it up with the big lead as they get ready for the Pac-12 season. So we do like Utah, minus the 26. Louisiana Lafayette and Texas A&M from offshoreinsiders.com. Louisiana Lafayette over 2 games. They have gone over their 2 games by an average of 47.5 points per game, far and away tops in the nation. Teams that have gone over by an average of at least 40 points per game and with at least 2 games under their belt have gone over all time 4-0. The total opened at 67, but now it's only 59.5. So the public and the money is apparently coming in on the under despite that perfect angle. Texas A&M 4-15 at home against the spread recently. Now we're going to have your free pick, Louisiana Lafayette, to go over the 59.5. Tulsa versus Toledo. Tulsa, the number 2 over team, by an average of 30.5 points per game. They've gone over both of their games. Oregon versus Wyoming. Wyoming, the new number 2 under team, going under both games by an average of 28 points per game. But Oregon is a big over team, going over both by 16.8 points per game. Utah State and Wake Forest. This opened up at Wake Forest 15. They're now down to 11.5. Utah State will have to travel 1,732 miles. The total dropped from 54.5 to 48.5. Aggie quarterback Kent Myers already with 4 interceptions. Wake Forest's experience at dealing with an up-tempo game that Utah State plays as they stop Boston College's new high-pace attack, although Utah State, you might say, is a lot more competent and experienced at running the up-tempo. Wake Forest had an outstanding defense over the past couple years that kept them in some games and had Joe Duffy's picks at offshoreinsiders.com covering, in many cases, when Wake Forest is in good spots as big underdogs. But now they've got a pretty good offense to go with it. Northern Illinois, Nebraska. Nebraska down 3 starters, running back Trey Bryant, safety Joshua Kalu, and right tackle David Neville. Now, Bryant leads the team in rushing with 299 yards. The rest of the team has 35. Neville started 11 games the last 2 years. Wisconsin versus BYU. This opened up as Wisconsin 14.5 and 44, now 17 and 41. Very good rushing teams that are averaging 230 or more yards per game, playing on the road in a game that's expected to be low scoring, means a total 47 or less. Just 72 and 43 for 62.6%. That favors Wisconsin. Shouldn't say just, but a very impressive 72 and 43 for 62.6%. That favors Wisconsin. But big favorites in games expected to be low scoring. just 71 and 104, so that would favor BYU. Teams averaging 39.5 or more points per game, Wisconsin, with the total 60 or less is going under, 617 and 486. Wisconsin thinned on the offensive line as Bo Benshaw and John Dietzen are questionable. BYU has this game sandwiched in between Utah and Utah State, while Wisconsin had an off week. BYU starting quarterback Taylor Magnum is doubtful. Bo Hodge played 3 games as a freshman, 10 of 17 for 137 yards, 16 carries for 49 yards. He's expected to start. BYU is 121st in the nation in yards per play at 3.1, so they're among the worst offensively. Wisconsin defense 29th in the nation, allowing 4.3 yards per play. By the way, we do those rankings based on yards per play, not total yards, which is what the professional handicappers and gamblers use. Still, despite the total dropping, like this game to go under, Wisconsin under the 41. Kansas and Ohio. Kansas 26 and 58 is road underdogs. That is against the spread. Oregon State versus Washington State. Oregon State 0-3 against the spread and a nation's worst, minus 29.3 points per game. Teams with an against the spread margin of 29 or worse are 18 and 32. Now that says go with Washington State, though. Such teams are actually 8-3 when getting 14 or more, including 5-1-1 on the road. Now, again, we've always said that handicapping totals is more about pace than it is offensive or defensive competence. Washington State, 3rd in the country in snaps at 99 per game. Baylor versus Duke. Duke averaging 105 snaps per game, which is number 1 in the nation. Baylor, though, is actually 105th out of 125 teams, so their reputation might be of an up-tempo team, but that is not the case anymore. Kent versus Marshall. Well, you remember the old Mac used to have a reputation of being the most wide-open contest, but Kent averages the fewest snaps in the nation at 49. Baylor and Duke. Duke's margin of cover in 2 games by an average of 21.9 points per game compared to Baylor, minus 28, which is the 2nd worst in the nation. Teams with a margin of cover difference relative to their opponent of 36 or better and at least 2 games under their belt are 42 and 25 all time, unless they are a home underdog, and that favors Duke. Arizona State and Texas Tech, teams with a margin of cover difference relative to their opponent of 36 or better, which we just said, 42 and 25 all time, unless they're a home underdog, and that would favor Texas Tech. More from OffshoreInsiders.com. Texas and USC. Look, we're not a fan of Tom Herman. Teams off of games in which they rush for 300 yards or more have gone under 415 and 256. That would apply to Texas, and of course would be the under. Teams off a win of 43 or more and getting 14 or more of 58 and 34 against the spread. That would favor Texas. USC got the most yards against Stanford in the David Shaw era. So, look, their offense, all of a sudden, a nice effort against Stanford after they were so-so against Western Michigan. Texas off a great effort from Sam Endlinger, a true freshman, starting ahead of Shane Buechele. Bit of a letdown, though, for the Trojans, and not much of a look ahead, though, for Cal. But remember, they're coming off a big game against Stanford. But, again, not a sandwich game as California is playing ahead. USC will be without their starting linebacker Porter Gustin and their defensive tackle Marlon Tuipulotu. Gustin led USC in tackles for loss last year. Army and Ohio State. Teams off a loss as a top 5 team, according to the OffshoreInsiders.com database, 46 and 73 against the spread. Only 38.7%, so that would favor Army. Ohio State, though, is expected to get wide receiver Austin Mack back. Starting running back Mike Weber is questionable for Ohio State. He had over 1,000 yards last year on 6 yards per carry, was averaging 9.7 this year. LSU and Mississippi State, the number 1 sweat barometer team, covering 2 games by an average of 27.5 points per game. Again, sweat barometer or margin of cover, how much they have or have not covered the spread by. Home underdogs of 7 or more with a margin of cover of 25 or better, only 2 and 11 all time. That would favor LSU. Going with teams off a dominant win is 599 and 431. That would favor Mississippi State. Biggest consensus plays using 4 major sources. We survey Offshore, Las Vegas, and some major outlaw books. The biggest consensus plays thus far: Virginia Tech, Alabama, Oklahoma State, Purdue, Notre Dame, and Iowa State. This is based on numbers per bets. Again, not on total money. Especially if you're a contrarian bettor, you like those guys that bet small amounts, $5, $10, $15, $20 on a game. Now after that, the other consensus plays would be Notre Dame, Texas Tech, and Oregon. Biggest line moves: Western Michigan went from 14 to 20.5 against Idaho. Washington State opened up at 16, now minus 21 to Oregon State. Wake Forest minus 11, down from minus 15 to Utah State. And North Carolina started out at minus 10.5, or they're minus 10.5 from 7.5 against Old Dominion. Approved sportsbooks, most thoroughly vetted sportsbooks in the world, are at the homepage right now of offshoreinsiders.com.